everybody, so how are you doing today? We are going to be reading a story, but first up, we are going to be reading the Bible. Then we are going to be doing the synopsis with Kimberly. Then after we do the synopsis with Kimberly, we are going to be reading The Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to not miss another video. And here's my dad.
Hello! So we are on Luke chapter 21. I was thinking about what book of the Old Testament are we going to follow up Luke with? And put your comments below. All right, so this is the English Standard Version, Luke chapter 21. Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box, and he saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. And he said, "Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on." And while some were speaking of the temple, how it was adorned with noble stones, the offerings, he said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." And they asked him, "Teacher, when will these things be? And what will be the sign when these things are about to take place?" And he said, "See that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and the time is at hand. Do not go after them. And when you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, and in various places famines and pestilences. And there will be terrors and great signs from heaven, but before all this they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors for my name's sake. This will be your opportunity to bear witness. Settle it therefore in your minds not to meditate beforehand how to answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom which none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and some of you they will put to death. You will be hated by all for my name's sake, but not a hair of your head will perish. But your endurance will gain your lives. By your endurance you will gain your lives. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are inside the city depart. And let not those who are out in the country enter it, for these are days of vengeance, to fulfill all that is written. Alas for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days, for there will be great distress upon the earth and wrath against this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves, people fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near." And he told them a parable. "Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they come out in leaf, you see for yourselves and know that the summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all has taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and cares of this life, and that day come upon you suddenly like a trap. For it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the whole earth. But stay awake at all times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things that are going to take place, and to stand before the Son of Man. And every day he was teaching in the temple, but at night he went out and lodged on the mount called Olivet. And early in the morning all the people came to him in the temple to hear him. That is the end of Luke chapter 21, and Luke chapter 22 will be tomorrow when we have the next opportunity to read. So, yesterday we got to read. Hi, Becca! Yesterday we got to begin The Shadow of the Past, and so Gandalf was talking to Frodo, and Frodo, he asked about the ring, and Gandalf told the history. It was kind of, it's whatever. And then Gandalf took the ring, and he said, hey, do you have a freezer? And he threw it in the freezer and pulled it out, and it didn't freeze their fingers. It was really surprising. But when he pulled it out, are you going to wait for me to give the false synopsis so that you can give the real one? When he pulled it out, it didn't have anything unusual about it. It was the same as before. And Gandalf said, oh, I thought this was a ring of power, but maybe not. And that's it. Here's Kimberly to say what really happened.
Whoa! You okay, Dad?
JJ. Because he's sitting right there in the middle of my walkway.
JJ, be more careful, okay?
I think he's crying.
Yeah, I do too. Right. You guys can play this. Tomorrow. Please. Now.
Oops. That fell over. So what actually happened was Gandalf, he took the ring and threw it in the fire. And then after a little bit, he took it out and it had words on it that they couldn't read, except for Gandalf. Gandalf read them, and I forget exactly what they said.
It was the language of Mordor.
Yeah. I'll move you over a little bit.
How can you forget what it said?
It's
One
this
ring
place.
to rule them all. One ring to find them.
It's this place.
One ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them.
You're reading it from the book. That doesn't count.
You're right. Okay.
So then it said what Dad said. And it said more or less what Dad said. Gandalf read it in the common language, and they might not have one-to-one words for all of that.
But there's a poem that is well known that he also recited afterwards.
Yes, and it did have that in it. And it had like let's see, 3 rings for elves, right?
Mm-hmm.
7 for dwarves.
Mm-hmm. But
Makes me think of the 7 dwarves in Snow White.
Oh, actually, that's a very interesting parallel. I wonder if that's not where Tolkien got that idea, 7 dwarves.
And then there were 9 for man, and they all died. It said 9 for men doomed to die.
But the 9 men, they didn't just die, they became ring wraiths.
Yep. Basically ghosts.
Like really powerful magical ghosts.
Yeah.
The Nazgul.
I don't know what that is, but it
That's
sounds familiar.
Powerful ghosts.
Huh. Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Dad so he can read us the second half of the chapter. If I don't fall over first.
So, How are you doing, Becca? We're so
I did.
glad to see you today. All right, so we are on chapter 52, and there are only 1,043 total pages. Did I say chapter 42? Page 42, 52. And there's only 1,043 pages total in the book. So I'm estimating that we're about 1/21st of the way through the story. I'm doing well. I got JJ's letter. Yay! How exciting! Okay, so I was very interested in what Bible book to read because it looks like this. Crud.
Careful.
I'm not doing very well today. In case you can't tell, I'm trying to get my pillows positioned so that I don't sorry about this. Yay, hopefully this works. Okay, oh, and there's a picture that I forgot to show you yesterday. Here's a picture. All right. So I was thinking what Bible book to read. Probably doesn't need to be a short one necessarily. And I have my idea, and if you don't like it, then I might go with it anyway. So, all right. Let me just go ahead and pick up. Again, this is chapter 2, The Shadow of the Past, but we've already read half of it, so I will stop rambling now. Okay. Long after, but still very long ago, there lived by the banks of the great river on the edge of the wilderland a clever-handed and quiet-footed little people. I guess they were of hobbit kind, akin to the fathers of Stoors, but they loved the river. Excuse me, this is Gandalf speaking, so I'll try to do a more Gandalfish kind of voice. And often swam in it, or made little boats of reeds. There was among them a family of high repute, for it was large and wealthier than most, and it was ruled by a grandmother of the folk, stern and wise in old lore, such as they had. The most inquisitive and curious-minded of that family was called Smeagol. He was interested in roots and beginnings. He dived into deep pools. He burrowed under trees and growing plants. He tunneled into green mounds, and he ceased to look up at the hilltops, or the leaves on trees, or the flowers opening in the air. His head and his eyes were downward. Are we okay? Okay, sorry about that. He had a friend called Smeagol, of similar sort, sharper-eyed, but not so quick and strong. On a time they took a boat. Okay. On a time they took a boat and went down to the Gladden fields, where there were great beds of iris and flowering reeds. There Smeagol got out and went nosing about the banks, but Smeagol sat in the boat and fished. Suddenly a great fish took his hook, and before he knew where he was dragged out and down into the water to the bottom. Then he let go of his line, for he thought he saw something shining in the riverbed, and holding his breath, he grabbed at it. Then up he came spluttering with weeds in his hair and a handful of mud, and he swam to the bank, and behold, when he washed the mud away, there in his hand lay a beautiful golden ring, and it shone and glittered in the sun, so that his heart was glad. But Smeagol had been watching him from behind a tree, and as Smeagol gloated over the ring, Smeagol came softly up behind. Are we all good? Not good. "Give us that, Deagle, my love," said Smeagol over his friend's shoulder. "Why?" said Deagle. "Because it's my birthday, my love, and I wants it," said Smeagol. "I don't care," said Deagle. "I have given you a present already, more than I could afford. I found this, and I'm going to keep it." "Oh, you are indeed, my love, or are you indeed, my love?" said Smeagol, and he caught Deagle by the throat and strangled him, because the gold looked so bright and beautiful. Then he put the ring on his finger. No one ever found out what had become of Smeagol, but he was murdered far from home, and his body was cunningly hidden. But Smeagol returned alone, and he found that none of his family could see him when he was wearing the ring. He was very pleased with this discovery, and he concealed it, and he used it to find out secrets, and he put his knowledge to crooked and malicious uses. He became sharp-eyed and keen-eared for all that was hurtful. The ring had given him power according to his stature. It is not to be wondered at that he became very unpopular and was shunned, when visible, by all his relations. They kicked him, and he bit their feet. He took to thieving and going about muttering to himself and gurgling in his throat. So they called him Gollum and cursed him and told him to go far away, and his grandmother, desiring peace, expelled him from the family and turned him out of her hole. He wandered in loneliness, weeping a little for the hardness of this world, and he journeyed up the river till he came to a stream that flowed down from the mountains, and he went that way. He caught fish in the deep pools with invisible fingers and ate them raw. One day it was very hot, and as he was bending over a pool, he felt a burning on the back of his head, and a dazzling light from the water pained his wet eyes. He wondered at it, for he had almost forgotten about the sun. Then, for the last time, he looked up and shook his fist at her. But he lowered his eyes. He saw far above the tops of the misty mountains, out of which the stream came, and he thought suddenly, it would be cool and shady under those mountains. The sun could not watch me there. The roots of those mountains must be roots indeed. There must be great secrets buried there which have not been discovered since the beginning. So he journeyed by night up into the highlands, and he found a little cave out of which the dark stream ran, and he wormed his way like a maggot into the heart of the hills, and vanished out of all knowledge. The ring went into the shadows with him, and even the Maker, when his power had begun to grow again, could learn nothing of it. "Gollum," said Frodo. "Gollum? Do you mean that this is the very Gollum creature that Bilbo met? How loathsome!" "I think it is a sad story," said the wizard, "and it might have happened to others, even to some hobbits that I have known." "I can't believe that Gollum was connected with hobbits, however distantly," said Frodo with some heat. "What an abominable notion!" "It is true all the same," replied Gandalf, "about their origins at any rate. I know more than hobbits do themselves, and even Bilbo's story suggests the kinship. There was a great deal in the background of their minds and memories that was very similar. They understood one another remarkably well, very much better than a hobbit would understand, say, a dwarf, or an orc, or even an elf. Think of the riddles they both knew, for one thing." "Yes," said Frodo, "though other folks besides hobbits ask riddles, and of much the same sort, and hobbits don't cheat. Gollum meant to cheat all the time. He was just trying to put poor Bilbo off his guard, and I dare say it amused his wickedness to start a game which might end in providing him with an easy victim, but if he lost, would not hurt him." "Only too true, I fear," said Gandalf. "But there was something else in it, I think, which you don't see yet. Even Gollum was not wholly ruined. He had proved tougher than even one of the wise would have guessed, as a hobbit might. There was a little corner of his mind that was still his own, and light came through it, as through a chink in the dark. Light out of the past. It was actually pleasant, I think, to hear a kindly voice again, bringing up memories of wind and trees and sun on the grass and such forgotten things. But that, of course, would only make the evil part of him angrier in the end, unless it could be conquered, unless it could be cured, Gandalf sighed. Alas, there is little hope of that for him, yet not no hope. No, not though he possessed the ring so long, almost as far back as he can remember, for it was long since he had worn it much. In the black darkness it was seldom needed. Certainly he had never faded. He is thin and tough still, but the thing was eating up his mind, of course, and the torment had become almost unbearable. All the great secrets under the mountain had turned out to be just empty night. There was nothing more to find out, nothing worth doing, only nasty, furtive eating and resentful remembering. He was altogether wretched. He hated the dark, and he hated light more. He hated everything, and the ring most of all. "What do you mean?" said Frodo. "Surely the ring was his precious, and the only thing he cared for. But if he hated it, why didn't he get rid of it, or go away and leave it?" "You ought to begin to understand, Frodo. After all you have heard," said Gandalf. "He hated it and loved it, as he hated and loved himself. He could not get rid of it. He had no will left in the matter. A ring of power looks after itself, Frodo. It may slip off treacherously, but its keeper never abandons it. At most, he plays with the idea of handing it on to someone else's care, and that only at an early stage when it first begins to grip. But as far as I know, Bilbo alone in history has ever gone beyond playing and really done it. He needed all my help, too, and even so he would never have just forsaken it, or cast it aside. It was not Gollum, Frodo, but the ring itself that decided things. The ring left him." "What? Just in time to meet Bilbo?" said Frodo. "Wouldn't an orc have suited it better?" "It is no laughing matter," said Gandalf. "Not for you. It was the strangest event in the whole history of the ring so far. Bilbo's arrival just at that time, and putting his hand on it, blindly in the dark. There was more than one power at work, Frodo. The ring was trying to get back to its master. It had slipped from Isildur's hand and betrayed him. Then, when a chance came, it caught poor Smeagol, and he was murdered, and after that Gollum, and it had devoured him. It could make no further use of him. He was too small and mean, and as long as it stayed with him, he would never leave his deep pool again. So now, when its master was awake once more and sending out his dark thought from Mirkwood, it abandoned Gollum, only to be picked up by the most unlikely person imaginable, Bilbo from the Shire. Behind that there was something else at work, beyond any design of the ring-maker. I can put it no plainer than by saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and not by its maker, in which case you also were meant to have it, and that may be an encouraging thought." "It is not," said Frodo, "though I am not sure that I understand you. But how have you learned all this about the ring and about Gollum? Do you really know it all, or are you just guessing still?" Gandalf looked at Frodo, and his eyes glinted. "I knew much, and I have learned much," he answered, "but I am not going to give an account of all my doings to you. The history of Elendil and Isildur and the One Ring is known to all the wise. Your ring is shown to be that one ring by the fire writing alone, apart from any other evidence." "And when did you discover that?" asked Frodo, interrupting. "Just now in this room, of course," answered the wizard sharply. "But I expected to find it. I have come back from dark journeys and long search to make that final test. It is the last proof, and all is now only too clear. Making out Gollum's part and fitting it into the gap in the history required some thought. I may have started with guesses about Gollum, but I am not guessing now. I know. I have seen him. You have seen Gollum? Exclaimed Frodo in amazement. Yes, the obvious thing to do, of course, if one could. I tried long ago, but I have managed it at last. Then what happened after Bilbo escaped from him? Do you know that? Not so clearly. What I have told you is what Gollum was willing to tell, though not, of course, in the way I have reported it. Gollum is a liar, and you have to sift his words. For instance, he called the ring his birthday present, and he stuck to that. He said it came from his grandmother, who had lots of beautiful things of that kind. A ridiculous story. I have no doubt that Smeagol's grandmother was a matriarch, a great person in her way, but to talk of her possessing many elven rings was absurd, and as for giving them away, it was a lie, but a lie with a grain of truth. The murder of Smeagol haunted Gollum, and he had made up a defense, repeating it to his precious over and over again as he gnawed bones in the dark until he almost believed it. It was his birthday. Smeagol ought to have given the ring to him. It had obviously turned up just so as to be a present. It was his birthday present, and so on and so on. I endured him as long as I could, but the truth was desperately important, and in the end I had to be harsh. I put the fear of fire on him, and wrung the true story out of him bit by bit, together with much snivelling and snarling. He thought he was misunderstood and ill-used, but when he had at last told me his history, as far as the end of the riddle game and Bilbo's escape, he would not say any more, except in dark hints. Some other fear was on him greater than mine. He muttered that he was going to get his own back. People would see if he would stand being kicked and driven into a hole and then robbed. Gollum had good friends now, good friends and very strong. They would help him. Baggins would pay for it. That was his chief thought. He hated Bilbo and cursed his name. What is more, he knew where he came from. But how did he find that out? Asked Frodo. Well, as for the name, Bilbo very foolishly told Gollum himself, and after that it would not be difficult to discover his country, once Gollum came out. Oh, yes, he came out. His longing for the ring proved stronger than his fear of the orcs, or even of the light. After a year or two he left the mountains. You see, though still bound by a desire of it, the ring was no longer devouring him. He began to revive a little. He felt old, terribly old, yet less timid, and he was mortally hungry. Light of sun and moon, he still feared and hated, and he always will, I think, but he was cunning. He found he could hide from daylight and moonshine, and make his way swiftly and softly by dead of night with his pale cold eyes, and catch small frightened or unwary things. He grew stronger and bolder with new food and new air. He found his way into Mirkwood, as one would expect. "Is that where you found him?" asked Frodo. "I saw him there," answered Gandalf. But before that he had wandered far, following Bilbo's trail. It was difficult to learn anything from him for certain, for his talk was constantly interrupted by curses and threats. What had it got in its pockets, as he said? It would say, "No, precious, little cheat. Not a fair question. It cheated first. It did. It broke the rules. We ought to have squeezed it. Yes, precious, and we will, precious." That is a sample of his talk. I don't suppose you want any more. I had weary days of it. But from hints dropped among the snarls, I even gathered that his padding feet had taken him at last to Esgaroth, and even to the streets of Dale, listening secretly and peering. Well, the news of the great events went far and wide in Wilderland, and many had heard Bilbo's name and knew where he came from. We had made no secret of our return journey to his home in the west. Gollum's sharp ears would soon learn what he wanted. Then why didn't he track Bilbo further? Asked Frodo. Why didn't he come to the Shire? Ah, said Gandalf. Now we come to it. I think Gollum tried to. He set out and came back westward as far as the great river, but then he turned aside. He was not daunted by the distance, I am sure. No, something else drew him away, so my friends think, those that hunted him for me. The wood elves tracked him first, an easy task for them, for his trail was still fresh then. Through Mirkwood and back again it led them, though they never caught him. The wood was full of the rumor of him, dreadful tales even among beasts and birds. The woodmen said that there was some new terror abroad, and a ghost that drank blood. It climbed trees to find nests, it crept into holes to find the young, it slipped through windows to find cradles. But at the western edge of Mirkwood the trail turned away. It wandered off southward and passed out of the wood elves' ken and was lost. And then I made a great mistake. Yes, Frodo, and not the first, though I fear it may prove the worst. I let the matter be. I let him go, for I had much else to think of at that time, and still I trusted the lore of Saruman. Well, that was years ago. I have paid for it since with many dark and dangerous days. The trail was long cold when I took it up again after Bilbo left here, and my search would have been in vain but for the help that I had found from a friend, Aragorn, the greatest traveler and huntsman of this age of the world. Together we sought for Gollum down the whole length of Wilderland, without hope and without success. But at last, when I had given up the chase and turned to other parts, Gollum was found. My friend returned out of great perils, bringing the miserable creature with him. What he had been doing he would not say. He only wept and called us cruel, and many a Gollum on his throat. And when we pressed him, he whined and cringed and rubbed his long hands, licking his fingers as if they pained him, and as if he remembered some old torture. But I am afraid there is no possible doubt he had made his slow, sneaking way, step by step, mile by mile, south, down at last to the land of Mordor. A heavy silence fell in the room. Frodo could hear his heart beating. Even outside, everything seemed still. No sound of Sam's shears could now be heard. Yes, to Mordor, said Gandalf. Alas, Mordor draws all wicked things, and the Dark Power was bending all its will to gather them there. The ring of the enemy would leave its mark, too, leave him open in the summons. And all folk were whispering then of the new shadow of the south and its hatred of the west. There were his fine new friends who would help him in his revenge. Wretched fool! In that land he would learn much, too much for his comfort, and sooner or later, as he lurked and pried on the borders, he would be caught and taken for examination. That was the way of it, I fear. When he was found, he had already been there long, and was on his way back, on some errand of mischief. But that does not matter much now. His worst mischief was done. Yes, alas, through him the enemy has learned that the One has been found again. He knows where Isildur fell. He knows where Gollum found his ring. He knows that it is a great ring, for it gave him long life. He knows that it is not one of the three, for they have never been lost, and they endure no evil. He knows that it is not one of the 7 or the 9, for they are all accounted for. He knows that it is the one, and he has at last heard, I think, of hobbits and the Shire. The Shire. He may be seeking for it now, if he has not already found out where it lies. Indeed, Frodo, I fear that he may even think that the long unnoticed name of Baggins has become important. But that is terrible, cried Frodo. Far worse than the worst that I had imagined. From your hints and warnings, oh, Gandalf, best of friends, what am I to do? For now I am really afraid. What am I to do? What a pity that Bilbo did not stab that vile creature when he had a chance. Pity. It was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy, not to strike without need. And he has been well rewarded, Frodo. Be sure that he took so little hurt from the evil and escaped in the end, because he began his ownership of the ring so, with pity. I am sorry, said Frodo, but I am frightened, and I do not feel any pity for Gollum. You have not seen him, Gandalf broke in. No, and I don't want to, said Frodo. I can't understand you. Do you mean to say that you and the elves have let him live on after all those horrible deeds? Now, at any rate, he is as bad as an orc, and just an enemy. He deserves death. Deserves it? I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. I have not much hope that Gollum can be cured before he dies, but there is a chance of it, and he is bound up with the fate of the ring. My heart tells me that he has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before the end, and when that comes, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many, yours not least. In any case, we did not kill him. He is very old and very wretched. The wood elves have him in prison, but they treat him with such kindness as they can find in their wise hearts. All the same, said Frodo, even if Bilbo could not kill Gollum, I wish he had not kept the ring. I wish he had never found it, and that I had not gotten it. Why did you let me keep it? Why didn't you make me throw it away, or destroy it? Let you? Make you? Said the wizard. Haven't you been listening to all that I have said? You are not thinking of what you are saying. But as for throwing it away, that was obviously wrong. Those rings have a way of being found. In evil hands it might have done great evil. Worst of all, it might have fallen into the hands of the enemy. Indeed, it certainly would, for this is the one, and he is exerting all his power to find it or draw it to himself. Of course, my dear Frodo, it was dangerous for you, and that has troubled me deeply, but there was so much at stake that I had to take some risk, though even when I was far away, there has never been a day when the Shire has not been guarded by watchful eyes. As long as you never used it, I did not think that the ring would have any lasting effect on you, not for evil, not at any rate for a very long time. And you must remember that 9 years ago, when I last saw you, I still knew little for certain. But why not destroy it, as you say should have been done long ago? Cried Frodo again. If you had warned me, or even sent me a message, I would have done away with it. Would you? How would you do that? Have you ever tried? No, but I suppose one could hammer it or melt it. Try, said Gandalf. Try now. Frodo drew the ring out of his pocket again and looked at it. It now appeared plain and smooth, without mark or device that he could see. The gold looked very fair and pure, and Frodo thought how rich and beautiful was its color, how perfect was its roundness. It was an admirable thing, and altogether precious. When he took it out, he had intended to fling it from him into the very hottest part of the fire, but he found now that he could not do so, not without a great struggle. He weighed the ring in his hand, hesitating and forcing himself to remember all that Gandalf had told him, and then, with an effort of will, he made a movement as if to cast it away, but he found that he had put it back in his pocket. Gandalf laughed grimly. "You see, already you too, Frodo, cannot easily let it go, nor will to damage it. And I could not make you, except by force, which would break your mind. But as for breaking the ring, force is useless. Even if you took it and struck it with a heavy sledgehammer, it would make no dent in it. It cannot be unmade by your hands or by mine. Your small fire, of course, would not melt even ordinary gold. This ring has already passed through it unscathed and even unheated, but there is no smith's forge in this shire that could change it at all. Not even the anvils and furnaces of the dwarves could do that. It has been said that dragon fire could melt and consume the rings of power, but there is not now any dragon left on earth in which the old fire is hot enough, nor was there ever any dragon, not even Ancalagan the Black, who could have harmed the One Ring, the ruling ring, for that was made by Sauron himself. There is only one way to find the cracks of doom in the depths of Orodruin, the Fire Mountain, and cast the ring in there, if you really wish to destroy it, to put it beyond the grasp of the enemy forever." "I do really wish to destroy it," cried Frodo, to have it destroyed. "I am not made for a perilous quest. I wish I had never seen the ring. Why did it come to me? Why was I chosen?" "Such questions cannot be answered," said Gandalf. "You may be sure that it was not for any merit that others do not possess, not for power or wisdom at any rate, but you have been chosen, and you must therefore use such strength and heart and wits as you have." "But I have so little of any of those things. You are wise and powerful. Will you not take the ring?" "No," cried Gandalf, springing to his feet. "With that power I should have power too great and terrible. And over me the ring would gain a power still greater and more deadly." His eyes flashed, and his face was lit as by a fire within. "Do not tempt me, for I do not wish to become like the Dark Lord himself. Yet the way of the ring to my heart is by pity for weakness and the desire of strength to do good. Do not tempt me. I dare not take it, not even to keep it safe, unused. The wish to wield it would be too great for my strength. I shall have such need of it. Great perils lie before me." He went to the window and drew aside the curtains and the shutters. Sunlight streamed back again into the room. Sam passed along the path outside, whistling. "And now," said the wizard, turning back to Frodo, "the decision lies with you. But I will always help you." He laid his hand on Frodo's shoulder. "I will help you bear this burden as long as it is yours to bear. But we must do something soon. The enemy is moving." There was a long silence. Gandalf sat down again and puffed at his pipe, as if lost in thought. His eyes seemed closed, but under the lids he was watching Frodo intently. Frodo gazed fixedly at the red embers on the hearth until they filled all his vision, and he seemed to be looking down into profound wells of fire. He was thinking of the fabled cracks of doom and the terror of the fiery mountain. "Well," said Gandalf at last, "what are you thinking about? Have you decided what to do?" "No," answered Frodo, coming back to himself out of the darkness, and finding to his surprise that it was not dark, and that out of the window he could see the sunlit garden. "Or perhaps yes. as far as I understand what you have said, I suppose I must keep the ring and guard it, at least for the present, whatever it may do to me. Whatever it may do, it will be slow to evil, if you keep it with that purpose, said Gandalf. I hope so, said Frodo, but I hope that you may find some other better keeper soon. But in the meanwhile, it seems that I am a danger to all that live near me. I cannot keep the ring and stay here. I ought to leave Bag End, leave the Shire, leave everything and go away. He sighed. I should like to save the Shire if I could, though there have been times when I thought the inhabitants too stupid and dull for words, and have felt that an earthquake or an invasion of dragons might be good for them. But I don't feel that now. I feel that as long as the Shire lies behind, safe and comfortable, I shall find wandering more bearable. I shall know that somewhere there is a firm foothold, even if my feet cannot stand there again. Of course, I have sometimes thought of going away, but I imagine that as kind of a holiday, a series of adventures like Bilbo's or better, ending in peace. But this would mean exile, a flight from danger into danger, drawing it after me. And I suppose I must go alone if I am to do that and save the Shire. But I feel very small and very uprooted and, well, desperate. The enemy is so strong and terrible. He did not tell Gandalf, but he was speaking a great desire. To follow Bilbo flamed up in his heart. To follow Bilbo, and even perhaps to find him again. It was so strong that it overcame his fear. He could almost have run out there and then down the road without his hat, as Bilbo had done on a similar morning long ago. My dear Frodo, exclaimed Gandalf, hobbits really are amazing creatures, as I have said before. You can learn all there is to know about their ways in a month, and yet after 100 years they can still surprise you at a pinch. I hardly expected to get such an answer, not even from you. But Bilbo made no mistake in choosing his heir, though he little thought how important it would prove. I am afraid you are right. The ring will not be able to stay hidden in the Shire much longer, and for your own sake, as well as for others, you will have to go, and leave the name Baggins behind you. The name will not be safe to have outside the Shire or in the wild. I will give you a traveling name now. When you go as Mr. Underhill. Remember that name, Kimmy. Underhill.
Oh, great. Another name.
But I don't think you need go alone. Not if you know of anyone you can trust, and who would be willing to go by your side, and that you would be willing to take into unknown perils. But if you look for a companion, be careful in choosing, and be careful of what you say, even to your closest friends. The enemy has many spies and many ways of hearing. Suddenly he stopped, as if listening. Frodo became aware that all was very quiet, inside and outside. Gandalf crept to one side of the window, then, with a dart, he sprang to the sill and thrust a long arm out and downwards. There was a squawk, and up came Sam Gamgee's curly head, hauled by one ear. "Well, well, bless my beard," said Gandalf. "Sam Gamgee, is it? Now, what may you be doing?" "Lord bless me, Mr. Gandalf, sir," said Sam. "Nothing. Leastways, I was just trimming the grass border under the window, if you follow me." He picked up his shears and exhibited them as evidence. "I don't," said Gandalf grimly. "It is some time since I last heard the sound of your shears. How long have you been eavesdropping?" "Eavesdropping, sir? I don't follow you, begging your pardon. There ain't no eaves at Bag End, and that's a fact." "Don't be a fool. What have you heard, and why did you listen?" Gandalf's eyes flashed, and his brows stuck out like bristles. "Mr. Frodo, sir," cried Sam, quaking. "Don't let him hurt me, sir. Don't let him turn me into anything unnatural. My old dad would take on so. I mean no harm, on my honor, sir." "He won't hurt you," said Frodo, hardly able to keep from laughing, although he was himself startled and rather puzzled. "He knows as well as I do that you mean no harm, but just you up and answer his questions straight away." "Well, sir," said Sam, dithering a little, "I heard a deal that I didn't rightly understand about an enemy and some rings and Mr. Bilbo, sir, and dragons and a fiery mountain and elves, sir. I listened because I couldn't help myself, if you know what I mean. Lord bless me, sir, but I do love tales of that sort, and I believe them too, whatever Ted may say. Elves, sir, I would dearly love to see them. Couldn't you take me to see elves, sir, when you go?" Suddenly Gandalf laughed. "Come inside," he shouted, and putting out both his arms, he lifted the astonished Sam, shears, grass clippings and all, right through the window, and stood him on the floor. "Take you to see elves, eh?" he said, eyeing Sam closely, but with a smile flickering on his face. "So you heard that Mr. Frodo is going away?" "I did, sir, and that's why I choked, which you heard seemingly. I tried not to, sir, but it was burst out of me. I was so upset." "Can't be helped, Sam," said Frodo sadly. He had suddenly realized that flying from the Shire would mean more painful partings than merely saying farewell to the familiar comforts at Bag End. "I shall have to go, but—" and here he looked hard at Sam. "If you really care about me, you will keep that dead secret, see? If you don't, if you even breathe a word of what you've heard here, then I hope Gandalf will turn you into a spotted toad and fill the garden full of grass snakes." Sam fell on his knees, trembling. "Get up, Sam," said Gandalf. "I have thought of something better than that. Something to shut your mouth and punish you properly for listening. You shall go away with Frodo." "Me, sir?" cried Sam, springing up like a dog invited for a walk. "Me go and see the elves and all? Hooray!" he shouted, and then burst into tears. That is the end of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 is called 3 is Company, and the first word is you. So I hope that you are enjoying the story by Mr. J.R.R. Tolkien, and we will continue tomorrow. So have a good night, and we will see you then. Goodbye.